just one big story, isn't it?
Hi everybody, welcome to the Story Connection. I'm your host, Danna Wilberg. Well, there's a story behind every story, and tonight we're pleased to have with us author Thea Holmdahl. She's going to talk about the memoir, the beautiful, incredible memoir that she's written about her life, and it's fascinating. It's called Above the Golden Gate. And welcome, Thea. So good to have you on the show.
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you.
Well,
for
you've led such a fascinating life, but we need to start at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So you were born in Germany.
Yes.
And you grew up there as a little girl. So tell us a little bit about what it was like and your life in Germany.
My life in Germany, of course, the World War, Second World War was coming, and we didn't know about it. But in 1938, I witnessed, as a small child, how what they call the yellow shirts, those were Hitler's group that he employed to round up the Jews out of their shops, and I was witness to it because I went with a girlfriend collecting potato peels, which she used to feed her rabbits. And we went from house to house and from story to story, knocked on the doors. Those were apartment houses. And one of the door was opened, and a man with a rifle was there, and he said, "You are not going to take me." And then he slammed the door in our faces. And so we were sort of scared, and we interrupted our tour. And then we noticed that there were big trucks out there with the yellow shirts, the SRs, what is called, the Hitler's group, and they were rounding up the Jews out of their stores. And of course, I didn't know at the time what was happening. I mean, how did you know that? And I realized it later, that I witnessed these things, and so I needed to write that down. It's just a story to be told.
Yeah. So your grandparents owned a restaurant, and so how was that affected when everything started to come down? That was in the Crystal Knot. Started in what, 1930?
In November 1938.
Okay.
Yes. Well, they were actually living in another country, but my grandfather had to fly the flag, Hitler's flag, with a swastika over his house, because everybody who wanted to do business had to conform with what Hitler wanted to do. You had to be loyal.
Yeah.
So. I don't really know much about that, how they lived over there, because we then moved from where I was born, which was outside of Hanover. We moved to my father's area in Hanover, where he's from. And I was there during the war, of course, when the bombs were coming down.
Yeah. Now you talk about, in your book, you talk about stealing pears from the vicar.
Yes.
Just to have something to eat.
Yes, we were very hungry because during the war we had rations. But towards the end of the war, let's say 1942 to 1945, everything was scarce. And we had to stand in line for food, and there wasn't always food there, not always bread, and people, by the time they reached the the counter, there wasn't anything left, so you had to leave and were hungry for the day.
Yeah.
So I discovered the pears in the vicarage, and I crawled through the fence and got the ones that were on the
Where
floor.
there's a will, there's a way. Oh, wow. Okay, you also talk about dancing for your meals. What was that like?
Yes, when the war was over in 1947, or I think it was 46, my cousin would, I don't really quite remember now. I think I was 46. The refugees came from East Germany. East Germany was now occupied by the Russians, and our western area was occupied by the English in Hanover, and the Canadian troops were there also. And so my cousin came over, and she was a dancer, and she found a job in a resort town, former resort town in Germany. And she said, they are hiring people to dance on the stage, and we will have one free meal that is included in this deal.
Wow.
So I went with her because she didn't know the area, and I helped her. We went by thumbing our way through. And of course, there were not many cars on the road, so we had to wait a long time until we found somebody who would take us. And yes, so we danced on the stage entertaining the troops, which were the British or the Canadian officers there.
How fun.
Yes.
Okay, so let's jump to 1954, and you met Werner, was that your first husband?
My first husband, yes.
Okay.
And we were at a dance, you know. After the war, the best thing always was the dances were opening, and people just needed that, the music and the dance. And so the young people came together, older people were there too, and he absolutely wanted to go to Australia because he heard you could go there without paying for it. And but you had to live there at least for 2 years in Australia. We didn't know anything about Australia, so he just begged me, let's go together. They need people that are married. They wouldn't take single people. So we did get married and went on this big trip on an ocean liner for 5 weeks through the Mediterranean, the Suez Canal, and the Indian Ocean. And it was a wonderful trip, and I describe it in detail.
So that was a pleasant experience. So then,
Yes.
Was it a big culture shock once you got to Australia?
Australia was wonderful because there weren't any wounds over there. There hadn't been any war, and we were treated royally. They were feeding us and housing us, and gave us a job. And I was there for 5 years. Of course, my husband absconded and left me there high and dry.
Uh-oh.
Because he wanted to explore the outback. And he did. He thought there was a Wild West out there. Of course, there was no Wild West, but he was looking anyway.
Yeah.
So then he found another woman, and they just disappeared to Sydney, and I was left alone in Adelaide.
Oh my goodness. Did you have children?
We didn't have children, no.
Okay.
We were only married for a short time. And then my sister sponsored me to America, because she had come over here. My brother-in-law came with that group of scientists of Werner von Braun. He worked at the rocket at Lockheed in Sunnyvale. And so they were welcoming me over here, and I had a wonderful time, you know, finding all different. I mean, everything was so different here in America.
Yeah.
And Australia didn't prepare me for these, you know, airplanes overhead, and the highways, and those many cars on the freeways. I didn't know where they were going. I said to my sister, where are all those people going? And of course, the Bay Area was just really phenomenal. When you see that, you think you're in a movie set.
Yeah, more dancing, right? More dancing?
More dancing. Yeah, for me, of course, yeah, we went to the German club, you know, and more dancing in the sense that I met my second husband at the Holiday Inn in Oakland. My girlfriend and I went to a Best Line convention, and after the meeting there was a bar, and we heard the music, and she said, "Oh, let's go and have a look." And my third husband, the senator, I didn't know that he was a senator at the time, he asked me to dance. And my girlfriend said, "Oh, yes, you know." And I said, "It's just my red dress and my blonde hair, probably what he liked." But he asked me for another date and another date, and so, yes, and we got married.
So this was Senator John Holmdahl.
Senator John Holmdahl, yes.
Wow. What was that like?
It was very interesting, public life. Of course, he was very good at explaining things to me, but it was new for me. And then we moved, we were living up in the Oakland Hills in his house up on Fernhof. And then we had to, we lived there only for a few days on weekends. And then on Monday morning, we would go to Sacramento, and we live in an apartment over there. And then I learned, I heard about the Pals Club, which were the poor and lonely souls. Those were the women, the wives, who were accompanying their husbands to Sacramento.
Oh, how funny.
And they had all kinds of club activity going on, and you would meet each other in twice a month in each other's houses, and we had activity, and I describe in detail what we did. We had blood drive, and we had to help the senators, you know, get them prepared for their setting the needle. And it was a very interesting, and of course we did so many things over there, and there was a Pals Club, but you know, also those many affairs that my husband was in, and I had to accompany him to meetings and fundraisers. And
this was during the Reagan administration.
That was during the Reagan, and yes, the inaugural ceremony I was part of, and I showed pictures in there and how we were going through the Capitol for the first time, and he showed us his office, and the whole family was with us. Of course, his son officiated at the Senate, the Senate, what's the name of it? The Senate, I can't think of the name.
That's okay. There's a picture of you, and correct me if I'm wrong, isn't there a picture of you in there, of you sitting, were you sitting on his lap or sitting on his...
Yes, I'm sitting on his lap.
That would be scandalous today, you know.
Oh, yes. No, he was happy. Oh, yes. He was accommodating, let's say. Yes.
Wow. But you had to do a lot of interesting things while you were married to John.
To John, yes.
Jack, you call him Jack.
Jack, yes. Yes, we did a lot of things, traveling, you know, to Australia, New Zealand, and in New Zealand, I met the Premier, Mr. Muldoon, and he told me his wife's name was Thea also. Isn't that a coincidence?
Yes.
And then and we met in each city, we met the city manager or the mayor, or they invited us to sumptuous dinner, either to their house or in a restaurant, and it was a very interesting trip. And of course, we also went to England, and the Ambassador Richardson was in office at the time, and we were a guest in his residence, and got tickets to visit the parliamentary buildings in London, and I was shown the where they meet, the meeting hall, and I was allowed, and I described all, I was allowed to walk forward, and I could touch the mace, the symbol of authority, and that was for me the greatest thing.
Wow.
So I felt very privileged, to come that far, and yes, we
What
did.
and what a contradiction to your growing up, your years, during the war and being hungry, and then you come over here and phew.
I know.
Yeah, the
I know.
lifestyle.
Yes, of course, I was married 3 times, and my second husband, he was a GI, and he had been in Germany, and had many German ladies, over there, and so when he met me over here through his niece, because I was working at the Metropolitan Life Insurance, and so he thought I was another Fräulein, and he absolutely wanted to marry me. So we got married, and we adopted 2 lovely babies, 2 daughters. And the joy of my life. I would never want it to be without that experience.
So
raising them.
So you were married. What was his name?
Don.
Okay, so you married Don. You had adopted the 2 children, and then
we got divorced, and then I married Jack.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Wow.
So I was married 3 times, and
well, look at Elizabeth Taylor.
yes, she said she didn't go on dates, she married them.
That's too funny. So you do things like you talk about having brunch with the Oakland Raiders.
At the Oakland Raiders each time, because my husband had season tickets, and he had 4 season tickets, and he would always invite another couple, and then before the game, we were invited to the brunch that they had in the Raider arena and in the building there. And that was always because all names of San Francisco were invited there, because they were all owners of the Oakland Raiders. And yes, that's how I was first introduced to Bay Area society, actually.
Yeah.
And later on, we met them all again at the opening of the opera each time.
You also attended the Academy Awards.
We attended the Academy Awards.
I want to hear about that.
Yeah, that was very interesting. And gosh, I don't know where to start there. It was just really great. We stood, at the red carpet, and cameras on us, and of course my husband had to speak, and I was next to him, and then we entered, and there were actually the most beautiful ladies, actresses. They seemed like they were welcoming us from Sacramento, and so I'm writing that in my book. And of course, we had after the Academy Awards was very interesting. I mean, we were sitting in back and watched all that, and it was a film. It was a film being made of the Oscars.
Yeah.
That's where it was, on the stage, and we went through the whole experience, which you only see on TV normally. And I was there.
Shirley MacLaine got the award that year?
Yes, she was there too. And again, we were dancing, and while we were dancing, Shirley MacLaine posed for a photo shoot. And Michael Douglas was there with Brenda Vaccaro.
Oh.
And I had known Michael Douglas already. I'd met him. And yes, there were so many people that I met. And I felt really special because of this experience. Of course, I was married to him for 11 years, and so we did go to many events.
Wow. So after 11 years, you divorced?
We divorced after 11 years, yes. Yes, and then I worked for the legislature in the Capitol. And yes, and here we married, and wasn't married very long. And tried for us to get together again, and I wasn't really in the mood, and so I declined this time, and I
moving on.
had to move on. Went back to Germany then.
Oh. So you went back to Germany for a while?
I stayed there for 8 years. I
And
worked
then-
back in Germany again, yes. But that's not in my book. That'll be my next book.
Your next one. So what brought you back here?
All my children,
Mm-hmm.
and I was an American, you know.
Yeah.
Germany was wonderful, and it was all built up in the meantime, and no more wounds, and yes, but I loved California, and my children were here, and so yes, and my mother passed away then, and of course then I came back, and yes, stayed here.
So what is it like to write a memoir? To have to go back and visit all these areas, some of them painful, some of them delightful. What was that like? And how long did it take you to write that?
It took me a long time. I went to a class for adult education class, and there was a wonderful group there. We met again and again, semester after semester, and I think it was about 3.5 years. And we had a unique teacher. He had a unique way of teaching, Stephen Sterling, and he's my editor of my book also. And he asked us to write a chapter, and we met twice a week, and each time we had to read a few pages, and that really helped us to write, because whatever we read was sort of edited right there and then. And there was approval, or there was criticism, but always constructive criticism. And that is how the chapters grew, and eventually, however, the class did not continue because they were out of funds. The Gateway College up in Sunrise Boulevard. And so we continued meeting at each other's homes at a potluck. And among that group, I am the first one who was able to self-publish my book.
Well, that's fantastic, and we're so happy you did, because it's a fabulous story. Just, you know, to walk in your shoes, so to speak, as we're going through, you know, decades of just not just your life, but the monumental parts of your life. You know, being in the war, you know, being in Australia when it was first, you know, being developed and whatnot, and I remember, you know, that being talked about, that Australia was looking for people to settle there and stuff like that. So that's such an interesting part of our history.
And it was, Australia was a wonderland. And I write about that. People who read my section about Australia, they say that is wonderful, because they had never known it. But what also was interesting, I think, maybe I should mention it, that in America, I met the pilot who actually bombed our city.
Oh.
So I was the one, you know, I mean, where did this ever happen?
Yeah.
You know, I met him at Metropolitan Life Insurance. I was working there, and he was an insurance agent by now. And he asked me, where you're from, because of my accent. And I said, from Hanover. And he said, Hanover, I was a pilot. Hanover was second target. When we came back from Berlin, the bombs that were left over were dropped on Hanover, and he knew it well.
Oh my goodness.
So isn't that interesting?
That's
what
very
a small
synchronistic.
world.
Absolutely.
What a small world.
Wow. Well, we're almost out of time.
Oh, I see.
But I do want you to show everybody this beautiful book you've got.
It's a memoir, and it's available on Amazon and on ebook and on print on demand.
Okay.
Email address is Thea Holmdahl at gmail.com.
Well, let's give some information about the Story Connection, shall we?
The Story Connection airs the second and fourth Thursday at 9:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Our companion show, Paranormal Connection, airs the first and third Thursdays of each month. Each episode repeats the following Friday at 1:30 p.m. and Saturday at 5:30 a.m. Watch these programs online at the same airtimes by going to accesssacramento.org and clicking Watch 17. In the Sacramento region, you can see us on Comcast Channel 17 and on AT&T Channel 99. You can find previously aired shows on the Story Connection YouTube channel. For information on upcoming shows and previous Story Connection guests, go to storyconnectiontv.blogspot.com. You can contact us at storyconnectiontv@gmail.com, and don't forget, find us on Facebook, become a friend, and become a fan.
I was so happy to see the picture of you graduating from college in 1980. That was a big accomplishment for you.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
What drove you to proceed in that?
Being in public life in California legislature, I felt I needed to know more about the Constitution and politics, especially politics. And so I decided I just needed to, go to college. And I majored in philosophy and history. And yes, I have my BA from Sac State. In later years, which you appreciate much more, of course.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. I thought, good for her. There you go, girl.
I should mention too, I danced with Teddy Kennedy, and I wrote about that in the book also.
Oh, what was that like?
That was special, very special. We danced around the old tree.
Oh.
Yellow, about the yellow ribbon around the old tree. That's what I danced with Teddy Kennedy at the Fairmont Hotel. And that's what's in my book.
Oh, there's a lot of juicy tidbits and all kinds of exciting things going on in Thea's life in her book. So those of you out there that are, love to read, it's a wonderful, wonderful book. And it's called From Above the Golden Gate by Thea Holmdahl. It's just fabulous. Pick it up, enjoy it, and thank you so much for coming on the show today. We've enjoyed hearing all about your life, and what a phenomenal
Thank
life
you
that you've
so
led.
much for inviting me. I
it's
so
been
appreciate
great.
that, to give me that help.
And thank you to my wonderful crew, Ted and Laura and Lorraine. Thank you so much for coming on and making this all a possibility. So with that, we're going to say good night, and if you've got a story to tell, let's hear it right here on Story Connection. Good night.